So just because you put it in earnest money doesn't mean that you can't back out of the deal. It just means you have to be very aware of that you're going to get scrutinized if you do.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
better
go ahead.
jump through the right hoops to make sure you don't lose it.
But yeah,
right?
paying attention to timelines, where you can, where you can't. There's a point where it's getting pretty tough.
Well, welcome to the podcast today, guys. We've got a good show for you. We're going to be talking about earnest money. Earnest money.
Cha-ching.
What it is, roughly what to expect in the way of earnest money, and then how you could potentially lose it so that you don't.
Yeah, the why.
Yeah. We've got a guest today, Rick Gillespie.
Yes, sir.
On the lending side, so he'll give us some insight into what that would mean
From
in his
our
world.
side.
Yeah.
Love your shirt, dude.
Yeah, right.
Go Broncos.
Go Broncos.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, let's just give kind of the high level 30,000 foot view.
Sure.
We've talked in podcasts before about what are our buyers bringing to the table when they're purchasing a home.
Okay.
We've talked about the down. That's something that obviously the buyer is responsible for. We've talked about closing costs. They could or could not be responsible for. Well, they'll be responsible for it, but we may or may not get that from the sellers.
Right.
In prior podcasts, we've also talked about some costs like inspection costs, things like that. Right. We're going to want to get an inspection done on the home, and then earnest money isn't an additional cost, but it comes in pretty early on.
Okay.
When when we're going to make an offer, earnest money is that good faith contribution to the transaction that you're going to identify in the offer, amongst other things, that says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, might be a builder, might be resale.
Sure.
You don't quite know, and we'll talk about the differences of what that earnest money might be in the different circumstances. But really, that's money that you're going to have to anticipate coming up front early on that's going to go into escrow so that seller can then take it off the market.
Right.
Yeah, and it's kind of the idea we're putting some skin in the game. This is a real
serious
step. We're serious. Yep. And we want to show you that we're committed to the idea that we think we may want to buy your place.
Yeah, so between the earnest money and what's in the offer, a listing agent's going to help them identify what the overall strength of that is, and earnest money is to some degree going to factor into that. And again, it will differ depending on whether you're having a home built or whether you're buying resale and things like that.
So I got a question for you. So I was a real estate agent. This is back a while ago. And I don't know if it's kind of changed or not, but what are you seeing people typically have to put at the table to provide for an earnest money?
Yeah, in the resale existing market, I would say a good rule of thumb is about 1%. So if you're buying a $400,000 home, you're talking about $4,000.
Really? So that isn't a standard, because up in my area where I was in Garden Valley, they just basically told me, new agent, just rolling in. Now I've been around it, but they're like, look, just ask for $1,000, just get $1,000 and we'll go.
It has definitely changed over the years. I think my lowest earnest money, of course, this is 18 years ago. Holy cow!
Whoa.
Hey,
you're old, dude.
Take it easy. Easy. I think I did one for like $250. So
really?
So it is not it doesn't have to be a specific number.
Yeah. Okay.
If
the rule of thumb, that 1% is pretty. I mean, in
it's
the
an
4 years I've
expectation.
been, it's been 1%.
Right. It's kind of an expectation from sellers. Like, what is it worth for me to take this off the market?
Right.
What is showing me that you're serious? This day and age, I'm typically seeing 1% is what's expected
Good to know.
of the seller.
Got to have that conversation, and so
Yeah.
people need to plan for that.
Yeah,
right?
but now again, not required. Our job is to help you minimize your liability as a real estate agent. So we want to obviously keep that to a minimum. So if we can get an accepted offer with less earnest money contribution, we'll certainly do that. But just planning wise, I think you're looking
general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I remember when I was purchasing a house here in Meridian, it was 2015, and we went in and there were 4 people all making an offer. Now the folks that they wanted to sell to us because we were in the neighborhood, this person put $5,000 earnest money, right? And I initially only put $1,000, and they circled back and said, "We want to take your offer, but what can you do on the Earnest Money side, and I upped it to 10,000, and we won.
Yeah.
So I think you can even use it as a tool in that regard too, right? When you're getting a little bit of a bidding war too. So,
Yeah, you're going to have to figure out what stakes you can up with minimizing your buyer's liability. If you throw too much out there, then
It depends on what side you're on, right?
yeah.
So if all of a sudden I'm on the listing
Right,
side, I want
right.
more skin in the game if we're going to all of a sudden pull it from the market.
Yeah, just like they did for Rick. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, before I made that move, I made sure I got pre-approved. I went through underwriting, and it happened fairly quickly just because I worked for the bank itself. But I didn't want to put that kind of skin in the game and then find out that I can't get financing.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and that's a good, forecasting where the conversation is going to go, because that'll be in the how you could potentially.
Well, I
lose
love
it
that
portion.
because it nails what we've been talking about. Get your plan together. Understand where you're at, so you know the cards you can play with.
that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the one thing to know is that Earnest Money contribution at close is going to be contributed to the overall
Correct.
cost
Correct.
of closing. Some people are like, "Oh, it's money I'm just giving to the seller."
Yeah. Where does this
No,
go?
that-
How?
where's-
Why?
Yeah, it's at closing. But while it's an escrow, that's really kind of the meat of what we want to talk about is, one, you're going to come up with it, and then two, what to think about as we progress along.
Right. Right.
For me, it's always, how serious are you about buying the home, because this is what the seller's asking for.
Right.
Again, we want to minimize it, but yet, help win it if it's competitive, or at least get it accepted
Sure.
if it's not. And then, really it is, thanks, dear, appreciate it.
On the fly, baby.
There you go. So then there's reasons why it could potentially be in jeopardy,
Sure.
if you will, and those are contingencies. You're going to have a number of contingencies that go through the process, and we can walk through the escrow period, so the time that you put the offer in, you get it accepted, and the time that you actually close on it.
Right.
A good agent's going to tell you, hey, just so you know, we're getting further down the road. There's like that earnest money that you put in good faith. So just because you put it in earnest money doesn't mean that you can't back out of the deal. It just means you have to be very aware of that you're going to get scrutinized if you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
better
definitely- go ahead.
jump through the right hoops to make sure you don't lose it.
But yeah,
right?
paying attention to timelines, where you can, where you can't. There's
Yeah.
a point where it's getting pretty tough.
Right, right.
Time's
so
up.
let's just start that process. So I make
do
an
it.
offer.
Yep.
And how many days, I want an inspection done, obviously. How many days do I have that if I find something in that house, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and back out? How many days do I have so I can get that earnest money back?
Yeah, so we have state forms that we use, and they're blank as far as the amount of days, but they default to 5 if it's blank. So that's quite often used. I fill it in no matter what, even if 5 days works.
Okay, so 5 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you could push it out or pull it in depending on if the seller wants it to be done sooner than later. That might be a negotiating point they might ask for. They don't want to take it off the market for that long. You could make it a little longer if inspectors are just really busy, booked out. Like
Right.
you
I was
wanna-
going to say, what about timing from them? Right.
Yeah. You want to get if you're doing enough business, you'll know what to expect out of the timelines for inspectors, and you just adjust accordingly. And that's not just the time to get the inspection done, but chance to talk with the inspector, chance to get the report back and go through.
Go through. And then there's got to be a negotiation piece, I bet, if you find something, right?
Yep. That's a good point. So, you get this report back, and you're looking at it. There's a couple of things that can transpire. Either, hey, this thing's a mess. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't care if the seller is even going to fix it. I'm just gonna flat out terminate.
I found
terminate
mold. I don't want to deal with mold. I'm out.
Yeah, that'd be health, safety usually come up to the top.
Right.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I know up in our neck of the woods when I was dealing with a lot of mountain properties, sometimes we do the 7 to 10 day contingency inspection period just because of scheduling.
Sure.
Guys were booked out, or we're having guys have come up from the valley.
Okay.
And then once we kind of gave our response, let's say, then there was usually that 3 days they had the chance to decide how they were going to respond to what we were asking.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So you have that initial period that you said, hey, I'm going to get back to you within 5. If you ignore it and just let it go through, they're assuming that you're just moving forward. So there's that time to respond. Hey, it might be as hard as I'm terminating because I didn't like what I saw.
Okay.
It could be as soft as they just kind of let it go by. Usually they would say, hey, we're waiving inspection contingency. Or there might be what you just described is there's a sequence of, hey, we'd ask the seller to do this, give them 3 days to put some thought into it, maybe get some numbers around what it's going to take to to fix those issues, and
Okay.
and then it's a back and forth.
Yeah, and then you start seeing how the earnest money can be used. Like I've seen it where all of a sudden somebody will say, okay, hey, we'll address these issues, but we want the earnest money to go hard now. Like you don't have any other options out, and you won't get your money back if we go ahead and do this.
Okay.
So that's like the first step I've seen where they're all of a sudden, rather than earnest money continuing being there, and there's a few more opportunities to step away as a buyer.
Right.
That can be the first opportunity where they can say
Non-refundable.
if we keep going.
Yeah, if you're a seller and you feel like you're putting a lot into this home that you really don't know that you should or want to do,
Right.
but you're willing to do it if the buyer is committed, then that term, money's going hard. So just like the word sounds, it's tough to lose your money. It's hard to lose your money.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want that. So if it goes hard, then it's just committed to the seller. And even if for some reason everything falls apart, you change your mind or what have you, that money goes to the seller.
You can't get financed, doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
So probably is kind of the thought process. Hey, I'm taking the time to spend money to fix. If you back out, it's going to reimburse me for those fixes.
Yeah, that's one of the ways that money, the earnest money, can be affected.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah, so that's an early on contingency. So when we talk about contingencies, there's any manner of contingencies that could be in play to keep you whole with getting your earnest money back.
Okay.
If you just waived your inspection, which we would never advise, clearly you cleared that contingency. The clearing of the contingency, so let's say you did the inspection, you bounce back and forth for a while, there's going to be a point at which you have the meeting of the minds and you're clearing that inspection contingency. It's literally called.
So first hurdle clear.
Correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
now your money is a little more jeopardy than,
Right.
Sorry about that voice. I don't know what happened. there,
Yeah. Right.
but Anyway.
So what would be the next contingency that they're going to come up against?
Yeah. Again, it could be anything. If they wanted some due diligence they slid something in, maybe they've got additional inspection contingencies like a well or a septic that takes a little longer.
Water testing.
That's
things of that
a
nature.
big one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, radon testing. And usually some of those are collapsed in that same period, but some might take longer. Like
Right.
You're not just going to get a water, whatever the test might be. So
Sure.
that could be.
Well, you got to realize from the lending side, I might have a loan program that requires those type of testings to be done.
Right.
And if at any point during that it comes back and they will say, hey, VA, that well did not pass, therefore you can't get VA financing.
Seller has to address or you walk away.
Right. So, it could be a lending side contingency as well.
Well, and that's where sometimes we refer to as like maybe a seller can't perform, meaning they can't provide the things that we thought were there as a buyer.
Right.
So as the buyer, you're going to get your money back.
Gotcha.
And again, through most of all this, your money is going towards the price you agreed on. It's not just like sometimes people think,
It's
it
an
just
addition
goes
to it.
away. Like I'm just paying to
Right.
play the game right now.
No.
And
That's
it goes towards the purchase price you agreed on.
That's correct. And actually, you brought up a good point that we probably should have addressed beforehand. It's like, where does this go? Quite
Sure.
often these days, it's actually going to the title company. This is that neutral third party
Right.
entity that's just waiting instructions and pulling in numbers and file,
Yep.
all kinds of data. So they're going to wait for somebody to tell them what to do with that. And if they're at odds, it could get a little hairy. Most of the time, it's pretty cut and dry. The contracts say, in this case, do this, in this case, do that. But,
Right.
But that's where it's usually held. Back in the day, it was quite often held at the brokerage, the real estate brokerage itself, and then that broker would have kind of control over it, and then,
Right.
Obviously, he had to work with the other broker on the other side if there was some dispute or something like that. But,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So again, you're just going to kind of go down the process. Good agents, one's going to share that with you up front. That when you're clearing contingencies or when that might
Right.
be more in jeopardy, because as you go further along, you got to make sure that you're feeling good about moving forward with this. You can't,
Right.
you don't want to be on the fence and the kind of at the last minute go, man, I've been thinking about that and I wasn't sure, and then I got thinking about that, and then I wasn't even,
Sure.
I was even less sure.
And I got an example of that, but it's
Yeah.
down the road. I have an example of that one.
Okay.
Trust me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to feel strong about it all the way, and that's our job, is to help you as a buyer
Sure.
to feel strong enough to keep that money in play. 1%'s not an insignificant amount of money.
No, it is not.
$250 is an insignificant amount of money.
Your money
anyways.
is your money.
Your money's your
right?
money.
Yeah.
So just know, why we're putting it out there. And then before we get too far down the road, so the 1% is typically like on resale or what we would call like spec homes from builders. And we've talked about this. And, if you're if a home's being built, what kind of homes is it? Is it a spec? Is it a semi-custom? Is it a custom? And the specs, the builder designed it and picked its own colors, kind of neutral in nature in general, so it's gonna be pretty easy to resell. I think most of the time you can get away with 1% is typically what I see with most of the builders. Now I will tell you, most of the builder contracts, so those are not state forms.
Right.
Those are builder forms by design. They step kind of out. They'll take a lot of the guts out of the state forms and then they'll tweak on it. But a lot of them these days say the money's going hard immediately.
Yep.
So just be aware that, hey,
but again, have a good agent. You'll have that discussion with your client, right?
Yeah.
You'll be like, hey, by the way, you're going full commit right now, right?
Yeah.
Because I promise you, there are some agents out there that go rolling into these, they see these new homes and they're going to represent their client. They're going to have something built. They don't have that conversation. And these people are thinking they're following the normal protocol when you're not.
It's changed, yeah, and it's fairly unique. I mean, you can still do the inspection just like you do in a resale, and we advise that on new construction as well. And, if there's issues, of course the builder's going to fix it because he's got to sell it to you or the next person. And now it's disclosed and they're going to have to fix it anyway. So I'm just saying there's not a lot of reasons why that isn't going to be addressed.
Sure.
That's just a monumental foundation issue or something catastrophic.
Well, it speaks back to, again, the lending piece.
Yep.
Make sure that you are able to get financing when you're done with that construction project, because you're not going to have the financial contingency in your hip pocket either. Right?
Yeah. So I think, maybe this borderlines the point that you just made, but to your point, the lenders we work with, we know it take them quite a ways down the road, and hopefully at least desktop underwriting or formal underwriting to make sure that when you are shopping, you're ready to go. Because what we don't want to do is think you're qualified. I've seen lenders toss around pre-qual letters like it was candy, and then they get we get in the process and then they really can't perform.
As you as an agent, question for you: have you ever done a deep dive kind of walk through line by line on a pre-qual letter? They have covered themselves as a lender.
Outs,
there are so many outs from appraisal to final underwriting. Right. So I always tell everybody, let's go there. And especially in this day and age, volumes are a little bit lower. We can submit, even before you find a property, I can get credit and income submitted on a to be determined TBD property address. So what does that give you? That gives you a good solid 60 to 90 days of knowing that they are approved. You're not going to hit that financial contingency. It's going to come down to property now, right? So I would just recommend that in this day and age, ask for that because you can submit and you can get underwriting, and it is a little bit slower, like maybe not 24 hours. So it does take 48, but at least you're shopping with confidence.
Right. That 24 hours will give you a lot more peace of mind.
It just does.
Actually,
And then it just comes down to property. And here's the upside to that too. Something you can consider. I know it's a little bit off topic, but you can close quicker.
Yep.
It speeds up that process as well.
You've done all those.
Yep. You've already jumped through all those hoops.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Yep.
Nice. We could talk about other kind of contingencies, but just know that when you're talking with your agent and your lender, what contingencies do I have in play? Which ones are we now passing? And which is when is my money becoming more and more and more in jeopardy? And actually, actually in the new state forms, there's a period prior to close that it removes all contingencies.
So, question for you. I remember there was a season there. I was getting a lot of contracts where it was waiving the appraisal contingency. Are those days coming back, or are you guys seeing people waiving the appraisal?
Contingency appraisal?
I witnessed that up in the McCall area.
Meaning, like, hey, I know it's going to appraise probably at 650, but I got in a bidding war and I guaranteed you that I would give you 700, and they're just waiving that, saying, hey, I know my appraisal is going to come in low. I do not care.
Yeah, we
and
saw,
it doesn't affect the earnest money then.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that during the illness time. I'm trying to pick my words wisely. I don't know. Anyway, when people were coming in our market, and it sounds like a lot of other markets across the U.S., they were, they were intentionally throwing more money at it than what it was listed for. So a listing agent should identify the fair market value, based upon their comps and have it pretty well priced. So they were coming in. We easily heard a lot of cases 6 figures over the asking price. So yes, you had to clear that appraisal contingency. Otherwise, or what good does that do? If you can't get a loan,
Right.
Well,
It's back
yeah.
on the financing contingency.
Yeah, if you were on the listing side and they were throwing that kind of money around, you're like, you knew it wasn't going to appraise. You had to have them say, I'm going to waive that.
Right. Now, me as the lender, as those people would come in, knowing full well they had anticipated putting 50% down, but they had to got into this bidding war. So fine, they're going to put 55% down now or 60. Still going to totally get approved. Their loan amount really doesn't change with me.
Correct.
It's just, do they have that cash?
They got to fill the gap now.
They've got to cover that gap, and they can.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. But we're not back in those days today. Okay.
No.
I haven't seen it. I mean, we're a ways from that.
It's a unique property right now. Our market's starting to strengthen up a little bit, spring of 2023. And we're starting to see some competitive offers, but they're not going too much over ask. Yeah.
And then I think probably the final contingency that I typically run up against is the financial one.
Yeah, because you're pushing it quite often. I mean, there's a 30-day escrow to usually, for the most part, to give the lender time to.
And I will tell you that depending on the borrower, if I've got a very standard W-2 wage earner, good money, got bank accounts are super clean, I can have them approved in 48 hours and I don't have to worry about it. But more often we come across a first-time home buyer who's really trying to provide those updated bank statements, have to get, maybe they are self-employed and we got to get that tax return filed. And you can really see some of that gets pushed and they get what they call a conditional approval from the underwriter, meaning you're approved if you fill all these lines with the required documentation, and any one of those could trigger a decline. Right? Like we need this. So I purposely get with the agent and be like, hey, I can't divulge, credit scores and details, but I'm going to tell you, we got some work to do. Right. And I get with the client and you try to kind of just stay that off as much because there's nothing worse than getting to a week before closing. And then you get your feedback from your lender and they say, yeah,
this is going to be,
and it happens.
Yeah.
It happens more often than you realize. Like, I actually won a deal from another bank. Won't mention names, right? Because they did just that. They took 6 weeks. The appraisal was already done. Everything was already done. And a week before closing, they came back and said, I just don't really think we can help you.
Wow.
No, we're not feeling it.
Right. Well, had a lot of borrowers on the loan, had a lot of paperwork to get through.
Right.
The trick was there was one individual on the loan that was a little bit younger, hadn't generated a credit score yet, and that was the trigger. And we were able to figure it out, get it through underwriting fairly quickly because you got all the documentation, and we're able to take care of them. Met closing date because the appraisal was already done, just had to get it reassigned, right?
No.
So you just got to be really careful.
Yeah.
Walking through the process of good communication and making sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah,
so.
you gotta make sure you're working with a good lender that's sensitive to this is your earnest money. You're making all kinds of life changes, doing all kinds of big heavy lifting to make this happen, and then also the sensitivity of a builder as well. Like I said, most of the time they're gonna make sure that goes hard, or they could very well be very insensitive to your inability to meet that close date.
Sure.
And when it's whether a reseller or a builder, and they're looking at thousands of dollars of equity, which we've seen quite often.
Yep.
Because of that time period, you want your lender to make sure that happens. It can't be like a lackadaisical thing. So I'm just sharing on our end as agents, we are hypersensitive to the potential of your earnest money being in jeopardy.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of summarize it up, and then let's wrap it up.
I think we got one more though that's really important.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yep.
So that is on the financing side, and you already alluded to that if you get to the end, if that is the reason that you're trying to terminate, but that is a contingency, it isn't just a, hey, sorry, I can't get financed thing. Like they're not just going to, depending on what the deal is and how much earnest money is involved, they're not just going to, oh, okay, sorry, you couldn't buy it.
Yeah.
We're going to get challenged because we had sent them a letter saying, hey, you can really qualify.
We're looking good.
Why can't you now?
Mm-hmm.
So now it could be twofold. You may have the client ask me, hey, is there any way you can put together a letter saying I can't get financing? And we've talked about this. I will default to the truth and say I can't do that. Now, there may be instances like in a situation where someone is having a home built and we did have them pre-qualified, even pre-underwritten to pre-approval, But interest rates, what they do last year, they just started climbing. So we had a lot of clients that started out at 5.5 or even maybe 4.5, and now it's at 7.
Ouch.
There were some realistic situations where they did not qualify.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but to your point, I just want to make sure we capture
Yeah,
that one,
yeah.
'cause that one can get a little tough.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of go back over them again and kind of just listen. So we've got earnest money. Why do we do it? Because it starts the process of, hey, I'm interested. I'm putting some skin in the game. I want to show you I'm serious about your property, right?
Yep.
And so the first step after that is once you do that, and it typically is around 1% we see in our market.
One caveat is on the builders, on the semi-custom and the custom, and we've talked about this in what home are you going to build?
Yep.
Those numbers could go up drastically.
Could,
The
yeah.
semi-custom that's
Yep.
get more and more unique versus a custom, those could go up to 5, 10, 15, 20%, depending on the builder.
Yep.
So
yeah, you see 10% a lot, sometimes in that.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So
Just
anyway, I
like a
just wanted-
starting place, right?
Yeah, I just wanted the buyers of
Correct.
those homes.
Yeah,
to know that.
and I was kind of thinking again. I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking more just the resale side.
Yep.
So we got the 1%, or if building more, and then we jump right into, hey, due diligence.
Yep.
Get after it.
Yep.
Learn everything you can. Find everything you can. Your agent's going to guide you
Surrounding
along and help
area,
you point out
CC&R,
all the stuff you need to know to make sure you're making a good decision.
Yep.
That's the first time you can start feeling the effects of your earnest money, and then we go right into
whatever other contingencies you
They could
built
be tied to
in.
that.
Hey,
Yeah.
I got to sell my other home.
Mm-hmm.
Home sale contingency. That's a major one. What does that look like? So you might have to clear that. We're not getting a whole lot of accepted offers with home contingent
Right.
sales, but that could very well
It
be.
could
Anyway,
be.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you just clear.
Yep.
Yep.
Then what's the next couple? Because we have how many? I mean, we're talking. There's at least 4 to 5 spots.
Oh,
as a buyer, you can be stepping away and not have your earnest money affected.
Yeah, you could interject all kinds of things. I got to do this first. I got to do that first. But generally speaking, you've got 3 or 4 in a normal
that are
transaction.
standard, and then you can have
Correct.
other caveat ones based on
Correct.
your deal, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Man, just got to mind your P's and Q's when you're going through this process. And I think it speaks to, again, and I know you guys have talked about it, and we talk about it all the time, having that upfront conversation with people who know and have done this, experienced realtors, will save you a lot of headache down the road.
Yeah. Well, we talk about this in our perfect home buying process that, there's steps that we've seen a lot that cause these pitfalls, and we're structuring our home buying process for you as the buyer to make sure we avoid all of those pitfalls.
Right.
Obviously we only manage one side of the transaction, generally speaking. We can influence a lot of the other side of the transaction, but as best we can. And obviously this is a sensitive topic on the earnest money because that
Right.
gets sensitive.
Yeah, right. No one gets excited when they lose their earnest money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So, anyway, we covered a lot of ground. I'm sure there's other small details of what earnest money is and the ins and outs. But if you have any questions that come up, by all means, feel free to give us a call. We'd love to
love talking about it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, very good. All right, guys. What do you think? With that, we'll wrap it up. And
sounds good.
all right,
Hey, wherever you're at, make the most of it.
and have a blessed day.
There you go.
Be in the moment.
There it is. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.